The iron shackles bit deep into Charlotte's wrists as she heard the heavy footsteps approaching the cellar door. 3 weeks she'd been trapped in Cornelius Blackthorne's basement, surviving on scraps and rainwater that seeped through the rotting floorboards above. Her emerald dress, once pristine for her wedding day, now hung in tatters around her trembling frame. Sheriff Jed Calloway kicked down the cellar door with such force it splintered against the stone wall. His weathered hands gripped his Colt .45, silver badge gleaming in the dim lantern light filtering down from above. At 42, Jed had seen enough darkness in Willowbrook Valley to recognize evil when he found it. But the sight of the young woman chained to the wall made his blood run cold. "Sweet Jesus," he whispered, holstering his weapon and rushing to her side. Charlotte's violet eyes, wide with terror and hope, met his gentle brown gaze. Her auburn hair fell in matted waves around her shoulders, framing a face that spoke of both aristocratic breeding and newfound hardship. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming for help that never came. "He said, ... He said he'd kill me if anyone found me." Jet's jaw tightened as he examined the medieval-looking chains that bound her. "Cornelius Blackthorne's going to hang for this. I promise you that." He pulled out his lockpicks, fingers working with practiced precision. "I'm Sheriff Calloway, miss. You're safe now." The moment the shackles fell away, Charlotte collapsed forward into Jed's strong arms. He caught her easily, his heart hammering against his ribs at the feel of her fragile body against his chest. For 2 years since his wife Millicent died in childbirth, taking their unborn son with her, Jed had felt nothing but emptiness. Now, holding this broken angel, something stirred deep within him. "Can you walk?" he asked softly, helping her to her feet. Charlotte's legs wobbled like a newborn colt's, and Jed swept her up without hesitation, carrying her toward the stairs. "My father," she gasped, gripping his shirt. "Cornelius killed my father for his land. He was going to force me to marry him, make it all legal." Jed's boots echoed on the wooden steps as he carried her up into the main house. The place reeked of whiskey and tobacco, with playing cards scattered across a table still sticky with spilled liquor. Through the grimy windows, Jed could see his deputy Matthias Crane waiting by the horses, rifle at the ready. "Blackthorne's long gone by now," Jed muttered, settling Charlotte onto a Mothaton settee, probably halfway to the Mexican border. He knelt beside her, pulling off his coat to wrap around her shoulders. The gesture was practical, but the way his fingers lingered as he tucked the fabric around her made Charlotte's pulse quicken despite her ordeal. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "Father's ranch. Cornelius burned it to the ground after he... after H.E. "You'll stay with me," Jed said without hesitation, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "My house has plenty of room, and Mrs. Holloway next door can help tend to you proper." Charlotte searched his eyes, seeing something there that made her breath catch. This wasn't just duty or Christian charity. It was something deeper, a connection that defied explanation. In her darkest hour, this man had appeared like an answer to her desperate prayers. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Jet's calloused hand gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Maybe that's exactly why." Jet's whitewashed cottage sat at the end of Maple Street like a sanctuary, with its wraparound porch and climbing rose bushes that Millicent had planted before her. Passing. As he carried Charlotte through the front door, she marveled at the warmth that seemed to emanate from every corner, quilts draped over hand-carved furniture, books lining built-in shelves, and the lingering scent of fresh-baked bread. "This was my wife's room," Jed said quietly, settling Charlotte onto the four-poster bed in the sunny guest chamber. Lace curtains filtered the afternoon light into golden streams across the patchwork quilt. "She'd want you to have it." Charlotte's fingers traced the intricate stitching of the quilt. She must have been very talented. Millicent had a gift for making things beautiful. Jet's voice carried old pain, but Charlotte heard something else, acceptance, perhaps even peace. "I'll draw you a bath and fetch some of her dresses. You're about the same size." Left alone, Charlotte absorbed the profound quiet of the house. After weeks of terror, the simple luxury of safety felt overwhelming. When Jed returned with steaming buckets of water and an armload of clothing, she noticed how his eyes carefully avoided hers, how he set everything down with almost reverent care. "Take all the time you need," he murmured. "I'll be in the kitchen when you're ready." The hot water was a baptism, washing away not just the grime of captivity, but the lingering touch of Cornelius's cruel hands. Charlotte chose a dress of deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes, its modest cut speaking of a woman who valued substance over vanity. When she emerged, her hair clean and braided down her back, she found Jed stirring a pot of stew at the wood-burning stove. "Smells wonderful," she said, making him turn. The impact of seeing her clean and dressed in his wife's clothes hit him like a physical blow. She was breathtaking, not in the painted, dull way of the saloon girls, but with a natural grace that spoke of inner strength. "You look," he started, then stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "The dress suits you." They ate in comfortable silence at the small kitchen table, Charlotte devouring the hearty meal while Jed watched with satisfaction. As darkness fell, he lit the oil lamps, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me about her," Charlotte said. "Suddenly your wife—" Jed's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Most folks in town avoided mentioning Millicent, treating his grief like a contagion. But Charlotte's violet eyes held only gentle curiosity. "She was the preacher's daughter," he said finally. "It came to town when I was 25, already wearing this badge. She saw something in me worth saving, I guess. You loved her very much." It wasn't a question, but Jed nodded anyway, more than I thought possible when she died. He set down his spoon, unable to finish. Charlotte reached across the table, covering his weathered hand with her smaller one. The contact sent electricity shooting up both their arms. "She wouldn't want you to stop living because she couldn't stay." "How can you know that?" "Because any woman who could create such beauty," she gestured at the lovingly maintained home around them, "would want that beauty to continue. She'd want you to be happy." Jed stared at their joined hands, Charlotte's pale skin a stark contrast. To his sun-darkened complexion, he should pull away, should maintain proper distance. Instead, he turned his palm up, intertwining their fingers. "I haven't felt happy in 2 years," he admitted. "Till today." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Charlotte felt her heart racing, not with the terror that had consumed her for weeks, but with something entirely different. This man had saved her life, but more than that, he'd shown her kindness when she'd expected only cruelty from the world. "Jed," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his chest tighten with longing. Charlotte. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "This is too fast. You've been through hell, and I'm still mourning my wife. We, SHOULD, in single quotes. T. ... Shouldn't what? Shouldn't feel grateful? Shouldn't feel grateful? Shouldn't recognize? A gift when it's placed in front of us." She moved around the table until she stood beside his chair, her hand still holding his. "I know this is sudden. I know it might be wrong. But when you carried me out of that darkness, I felt something I've never felt before." Jed rose to face her, their bodies close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she'd used in her bath. "What did you feel?" "Hope," she breathed, "and something else. Something that scares me and thrills me at the same time." His free hand rose to cup her face, thumb tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbone. "Charlotte, I—" The sound of horses approaching at a gallop shattered the moment. Jed immediately moved to the window, hand instinctively going to his gun. Through the lace curtains, he saw Deputy Crane dismounting in haste. "Stay here," he told Charlotte, but she was already shaking her head. "No more hiding," she said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Deputy Matthias Crane burst through the kitchen door without knocking, his young face flushed with urgency. "Sheriff, we got trouble brewing." Word spread about the girl, and some folks ain't happy about you bringing her here. Jet's expression hardened as he stepped protectively in front of Charlotte. "What folks, Matthias?" Tobias Grimm and his boys are stirring up sentiment at the Dusty Rose Saloon. They're saying Charlotte here was in cahoots with Blackthorn, that she's probably his woman, and you're harboring a criminal. Charlotte gasped, her face draining of color. That's not true. He kidnapped me on my wedding day, killed my father. We know that, Matthias said quickly. McGrim's got folks thinking otherwise. He shifted uncomfortably. He's calling for a town meeting tomorrow night. Jet's jaw clenched so tightly Charlotte could see the muscle jumping. Tobias Grimm owned half the businesses in Willowbrook Valley and had always resented Jet's authority. The man had been sniffing around Millicent before she married Jed, and his resentment had only festered over the years. Let him call his meeting, Jed said finally. Truth has a way of coming out. There's more, Matthias continued, glancing nervously at Charlotte. Grimm's hired that bounty hunter, Silas Devereux. Claims there's a reward out for Charlotte's. Return to Blackthorn. That's impossible, Charlotte whispered, but even as she said it, her heart sank. Cornelius had money and influence beyond Willowbrook Valley. If he'd convinced authorities elsewhere that she was a willing accomplice, I won't let them take you, Jed said firmly, turning to face her. I don't care what lies Blackthorn has spread, or what Grimm thinks he can prove. Charlotte saw the determination in his brown eyes, but also the weight of what he was taking on. Jed, if you protect me, it could cost you everything. Your badge, your reputation, your life in this town. Some things are worth more than a badge, he replied, his hand finding hers again. Some people are worth fighting for. The declaration sent warmth flooding through Charlotte's chest, but it was followed quickly by cold fear. She'd already lost her father to Cornelius's greed. She couldn't bear the thought of Jed suffering because of her. Maybe I should leave, she said quietly. Head west. Start somewhere new, where nobody knows about any of this. No. Jet's voice was steel. Running won't solve anything. Blackthorn. We'll just send more bounty hunters, and Grimm will claim victory. We stand our ground. Matthias cleared his throat. Sheriff, there's one more thing. Mrs. Abernathy saw Devereux snooping around the house about an hour ago. He was asking questions. About Charlotte, trying to get a look inside. Jed's hand moved instinctively to his gun. Silas Devereux was a dangerous man, with a reputation for bringing in his targets, dead or alive, with a strong preference for dead. The fact that he was already in town meant Grimm was serious about his accusations. We'll need proof, Charlotte said suddenly, straightening her shoulders with newfound resolve. Something to prove Cornelius killed my father and kidnapped me. What kind of proof? Matthias asked. Charlotte began pacing the small kitchen, her mind racing. The marriage certificate. Cornelius forged one, claiming we were married, but he needed my father's signature as consent. He made Papa sign it at gunpoint just before. She swallowed hard. The forgery won't hold up under scrutiny. Papa's real signature was different when he was under duress. Where would Blackthorn keep such a document? Jed asked. His strong box, most likely. In his study behind a painting of his dead wife. Charlotte's eyes lit up with possibility. We could get to it before he returns. ... Too dangerous, Jed said immediately. If he comes back while we're there, he won't come back, Charlotte interrupted. Cornelius is a coward beneath all his bluster. He'll wait until he's sure the law is on his side before showing his face in Willowbrook Valley again. Jed studied her face, seeing the intelligence and courage that Blackthorn had tried to crush, but failed to destroy. This woman was a survivor. And more than that, she was a fighter. Matthias, he said finally, I want you to keep watch on the main roads. If Blackthorn or his men are spotted within 20 miles of town, you get word to me immediately. Yes, sir? What about Grimm and Devereux? Let them have their meeting. Tomorrow night, we'll give them all the proof they need. Jed turned to Charlotte, his expression softening. If you're willing to take the risk? Charlotte stepped closer to him, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I've been taking risks since the day I was born, a woman in this world. The difference is, now I have someone worth taking them for. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning that went far beyond their current predicament.
Ow.
Jed felt his carefully maintained walls crumbling in the face of her courage and determination. Charlotte, he began, but she placed a finger gently against his lips. Tomorrow we'll face whatever comes, she said softly. Tonight, I just want to feel safe. I want to feel like I belong somewhere. Jed caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that made her breath catch. "You belong here," he said quietly. "It's for as long as you want to stay." Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a turbulent night ahead. But inside the warm kitchen, two wounded souls began to recognize that sometimes salvation comes in the most unexpected forms. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Jed and Charlotte like a conspirator's cloak as they approached the Blackthorn estate. The imposing Victorian mansion loomed against the starlit sky, its Gothic spires and wraparound porches speaking of wealth built on others' misery. Charlotte's heart hammered as they crept through the wrought iron gates, memories of her captivity flooding back with each step. "The study is on the second floor, overlooking the back garden," she whispered, her breath visible in the cool morning air. "There's a trellis we can climb." Jed tested the wooden lattice structure, heavy with climbing roses whose thorns caught at his sleeves. "Stay close behind me. If anything goes wrong, you run straight back to town, understand?" Charlotte nodded, though they both knew she had no intention of abandoning him. As they climbed, she couldn't help but notice the strength in his shoulders, the careful way he tested each handhold before trusting it with their weight. This man who had burst into her darkness like an avenging angel was risking everything. For her again, the study window yielded to Jed's lockpicks with surprising ease. Inside, moonlight filtered through heavy velvet drapes, casting eerie shadows across Cornelius's collection of hunting trophies and leather-bound legal volumes. Charlotte shuddered, remembering how he'd brought her here the night before the wedding. That never was, showing off his possessions like she was just another acquisition. There, she pointed to a massive oil painting of a stern-faced woman in Victorian dress, his first wife, Cordelia. He always said she was the only woman who understood his ambitions. Jed lifted the painting carefully, revealing a wall safe with an ornate brass door. "Can you remember the combination?" "He used his wedding date with Cordelia," Charlotte said, the numbers coming back to her with crystalline clarity. "October 13th, 1852. October 13th, 52. The safe clicked open, revealing stacks of documents, bags of gold coins, and jewelry that clearly didn't belong to any one man. Jed whistled low under his breath as Charlotte rifled through the papers with desperate efficiency. "Here," she breathed, pulling out a marriage certificate with trembling hands. "And here's the deed transfer for Papa's ranch." Her voice cracked as she saw her father's signature, shaky and desperate compared to his usual confident script. "Papa, ... Yet's arm came around her shoulders, offering silent comfort as she composed herself. "This proves everything, Charlotte. Grim and Devereux won't have a leg to stand on." "There's more," she said, continuing to search through the documents. "Property deeds, bills of sale, ... Jed, Cornelius has been doing this for years. Look at all these names, all these families he's destroyed." The evidence was overwhelming, a paper trail of murder, fraud, and theft, stretching back over a decade. Cornelius Blackthorn wasn't just a killer. He was a serial predator who used the law as a weapon against innocent people. "We need to get this to the territorial judge," Jed said, gathering the documents. "This is bigger than just clearing your name." A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house below them. Both froze, Charlotte's eyes wide with terror. Jed drew his gun silently, motioning for her to stay behind him as they moved toward the window. "Thought I smelled something different in my house," came a voice from the doorway, smooth and cultured with an undercurrent of venom. Cornelius Blackthorn stepped into the moonlight, a silver-plated derringer gleaming in his manicured hand. "My dear Charlotte, you've led quite the chase." He was exactly as Charlotte remembered, tall and distinguished-looking with silver hair, and cold blue eyes that missed nothing. His expensive suit was immaculate, despite his recent travels, and his smile was the same predatory expression that had haunted her nightmares. "Let her go, Blackthorn," Jed said evenly, his Colt trained on the other man's chest. "We have all the evidence we need to see you hang." "Evidence?" Cornelius laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Do you mean the documents proving my legal marriage?" "To Charlotte and her father's willing sale of his property? I'm afraid those support my version of events, Sheriff." "Your version is a lie," Charlotte said, finding her voice despite the terror clawing at her chest. "You murdered my father and forged those papers." "Prove it," Cornelius said silkily, my word against yours. And I'm afraid a grieving widower carries more weight than a hysterical woman who abandoned her wedding and disappeared for weeks. Where have you been, my dear? Living in sin with the good sheriff? Jet's finger tightened on the trigger. One more word and I'll save the territory the cost of a trial. TSK, Sheriff Calloway. That wouldn't be very legal, would it? Besides, you're outgunned. He whistled sharply, and 2 men appeared in the doorway behind him, hired guns by the look of them. With cold eyes and easy confidence, Charlotte felt despair wash over her. They'd come so close to freedom, to justice, to a chance at happiness. With Jed, now it seemed like Cornelius would win after all, claiming her as property and destroying the man who'd tried to save her. Actually, came a new voice from the window, I'd say the odds just evened up considerably. Deputy Matthias Crane swung through the window with practiced ease, his rifle trained on Blackthorn's hired men. Sheriff, Mrs. Holloway saw riders heading this way and sent me to back you up. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, for guns pointed in a deadly square. Charlotte pressed herself against the wall, clutching the forged documents to her chest, like armor against Cornelius's malevolent gaze. This doesn't end here, Blackthorn, Jed said quietly. Even if you kill us all, there are copies of these documents. The truth will come out. Will it? Cornelius smiled that terrible smile again. I've been playing this game longer than you've been wearing that badge, Sheriff. Money talks louder than truth in most courtrooms. Maybe, Jed acknowledged, but some things are worth dying for. Charlotte's freedom is one of them. The declaration hit Charlotte like a physical blow. This man, this wonderful, brave, stubborn man, was prepared to die for her. It's not because she was his property or his obligation, but because he believed she deserved to be free. No, she said quietly, stepping forward. No more dying. No more violence. She held up the documents. Cornelius, you want these? You want to maintain your fiction? Then let's make a trade. Charlotte, no, Jed said urgently, but she shook her head. You let Sheriff Calloway and Deputy Crane leave unharmed, she continued, looking directly into Cornelius's cold eyes, and I'll come with you willingly. I'll play the part of your grateful wife, help you maintain your respectable facade. Cornelius considered this, his head tilted like a predator evaluating prey. And in exchange, you get to live, Charlotte said simply. Because if you hurt either of these men, I'll make sure everyone in the territory knows exactly what kind of monster you really are. I'll scream your secrets from every rooftop until your name is synonymous with evil. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Cornelius began to laugh, a sound that chilled Charlotte to the bone. Oh, my dear girl, he said, you still don't understand. I'm not the monster in this story. His eyes glittered with malicious amusement. You are. Cornelius's words hung in the air like poison, but before Charlotte could ask what he meant, the sound of multiple horses thundering up the drive shattered the tense standoff. Through the study window, the first rays of dawn revealed at least a dozen riders surrounding the house. And leading them was the imposing figure of Silas Devereux, his black duster billowing behind him like death's own cloak. Right on time, Cornelius said, with satisfaction, though he kept his derringer trained on Charlotte. I sent word to my associates that we'd be concluding our business this morning. Jet's jaw tightened as he recognized several of the riders. Not just bounty hunters, but corrupt lawmen from neighboring counties, men who'd sold their badges to the highest bidder. This was all planned. Of course it was planned, Cornelius replied smoothly. Did you think I'd leave something as important as my wife's return to chance? I've spent weeks orchestrating this little reunion. Charlotte felt ice forming in her veins. What do you mean orchestrating? Cornelius's smile was pure malevolence. Oh, my dear, naive Charlotte. Who do you think told me exactly where to find you that night you tried to run from our wedding? Who provided the detailed schedule of your father's routines, his security, measures the perfect timing for our negotiation? The blood drained from Charlotte's face as the implications hit her. No, that's impossible. No one else knew, didn't they? Cornelius's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction.
Think, darling.
Who knew about your father's evening rides? Who had access to the ranch's financial records? Who stood to gain considerably from your father's unfortunate demise and your disappearance? Charlotte's mind raced through the possibilities, rejecting each one as impossible until only one name remained. A name that made her stomach revolt. With betrayal and horror. Your beloved cousin Marcus sends his regards, by the way, Cornelius continued conversationally. He's quite eager to take possession of your father's ranch. Apparently gambling debts have left him rather desperate for quick income. Marcus? The name escaped Charlotte's lips like a prayer for the damned. Her cousin, her father's nephew, who'd grown up on the ranch, who'd been like a brother to her, who'd stood by her side through her mother's funeral and a dozen childhood scrapes. $50,000 was his price for your location, and his testimony that you and I were secret. Lovers planning to elope, Cornelius said. Money well spent, I'd say. Marcus will make an excellent witness at your trial for conspiracy to commit murder. Jed stepped closer to Charlotte, his protective instincts overriding even the tactical disadvantage. You son of a bitch, she's innocent. And you know it. Innocent. Cornelius laughed. Sheriff, you've been harboring a fugitive. Charlotte. Here is wanted for conspiracy in her own father's murder. Marcus has sworn statements proving she was my willing accomplice, planning to inherit the ranch and share the proceeds with me after a suitable period of mourning. The room tilted around Charlotte as the full scope of the trap became clear. Not only had she been betrayed by family, but Cornelius had engineered the perfect frame. Her word against Marcus's, her father dead, and herself found in the company of the alleged co-conspirator. The chains, she whispered, understanding flooding. Through her. You kept me chained not to break me, but to make it look like I was fighting against you when I was found. Exactly evidence of a lover's quarrel, perhaps. Maybe you developed cold feet about our arrangement. Cornelius looked genuinely pleased with her deduction. Marcus will testify that you came to him in distress, claiming I'd threatened to expose your affair unless you helped eliminate your father. Desperate woman, driven to terrible acts by passion and fear. Matthias cursed under his breath. Sheriff, half the territory's law enforcement is outside if they've got sworn statements. They've got nothing but lies, Jed said firmly. But Charlotte could hear the worry beneath his conviction. In a system where men's word carried more weight than women's, where money could buy justice, the truth might not be enough. Heavy footsteps. On the stairs announced the arrival of reinforcements. Silas Devereux appeared in the doorway, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the scene. Behind him came 3 more armed men, all wearing deputy badges from various counties. Sheriff Calloway, Devereux said in his gravelly voice, You're interfering with the lawful apprehension of a fugitive. Stand down and surrender the woman. She's not a fugitive, Jed replied evenly. She's a victim. That's for a judge to decide. We have warrants signed by Judge Harrison in the territorial capital. Devereux produced official-looking documents from his coat. Charlotte Pembroke is to be returned to face charges of conspiracy. To commit murder and theft? Charlotte's heart sank as she recognized the name. Judge Harrison was notorious for favoring whoever paid him most handsomely, and Cornelius clearly had deep pockets. Those warrants are based on false testimony, Jed protested. Maybe so, Devereux shrugged, but they're legal all the same. Are you going to hand her over peaceful-like, or do we have to do this the hard way? Charlotte looked around the room at the men who held her fate in their hands. Cornelius smug with victory, Devereux and his hired guns coldly professional. And Jed, her hero, her salvation, facing impossible odds because he believed in her innocence. She couldn't let him die for her. She wouldn't let his sacrifice be meaningless. I'll come willingly, she said quietly, stepping away from Jed before he could stop her. But I want something in return. You're hardly in a position to bargain, Cornelius said. Aren't I? Charlotte straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. You need me alive and cooperative to maintain your story. A dead woman can't confess to conspiracy, and a defiant one might say inconvenient. Things at trial. Devereux studied her with new interest.
Al, what do you want?
Safe passage out of town for Sheriff Calloway and Deputy Crane. No charges, no pursuit, no retaliation. Her violet eyes met Jed's brown ones, trying to memorize his face. Let them live, and I'll play whatever role you need me to play. Charlotte, No, Jed said urgently. We'll find another way. We'll fight this in court, expose the lies with what evidence? She asked sadly, against Marcus's testimony and Cornelius's money. Oh, my dear brave sheriff. You saved me once. Let me save you now. Pain in her voice cut through Jed like a knife. He realized she was right. They were outgunned, outmaneuvered, and out of legal options. But letting her sacrifice herself for him went against everything he believed in. I won't abandon you, he said fiercely. I'll find a way to prove your innocence. Charlotte stepped close enough to touch his face, her fingers trembling against his stubbled cheek. Then live long enough to do it, she whispered. Live, and remember that some things are worth fighting for. Before he could respond, she turned back to Devereux. Do we have a deal? The bounty hunter looked to Cornelius, who considered the offer with calculating eyes. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. But Sheriff, if you interfere with legal proceedings again, our deal is void. Charlotte closed her eyes, preparing to walk back into nightmare. But sometimes, she reflected, the greatest act of love is letting someone go even when it breaks your heart to do it. The territorial courthouse in Benton. Ridge buzzed with anticipation as Charlotte's trial entered its second day. Word had spread throughout the region about the beautiful woman accused of conspiring to kill her own father, and the gallery was packed with curious onlookers, reporters, and fortune-seekers drawn by the scandal. Charlotte sat at the defendant's table in a borrowed black dress, her hands folded in her lap as she listened to Marcus destroy her life with practiced lies. She came to me 3 weeks before father's death, Marcus testified from the witness stand, his boyish face a mask of false sorrow. At 28, he still possessed the charm that had made him Charlotte's favorite cousin. But now she saw the weakness beneath it, the gambling addiction, the desperation that had made him vulnerable to Cornelius's manipulation. Charlotte was hysterical, Marcus continued, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. She said Cornelius Blackthorne had threatened to ruin her reputation unless she helped him acquire Uncle Daniel's land. She begged me to help her find a way out, but when I suggested she tell her father the truth, she became angry. Said it was too late for honesty. Judge Harrison, a corpulent man whose expensive robes couldn't disguise his corrupt nature, leaned forward with theatrical concern. And what did Miss Pembroke propose instead? She said, ... Marcus paused as if the words pained him. She said the only way to protect the family honor was to make Uncle Daniel's death look like an accident. She'd already accepted Blackthorne's proposal, she claimed, and together they could inherit everything and disappear. A murmur ran through the courtroom. In the back row, Jed Calloway sat rigid with fury, his hands clenched into fists. He'd ridden hard for 3 days to reach Benton Ridge, leaving Deputy Crane to maintain order in Willowbrook Valley. Every instinct screamed at him to draw his gun and end this farce, but Charlotte had made him promise to let the law run its course. She still believed truth would prevail. Even in a rigged game, Charlotte's court-appointed attorney, a nervous young man named Timothy Ashworth, fresh out of law school, rose for cross-examination. He was earnest, but inexperienced, no match for the prosecution's theatrics. Mr. Pembroke, Ashworth began hesitantly, isn't it true that you owed substantial gambling debts to several establishments in Denver? Objection, called the prosecutor. A silver-tongued veteran named Sterling Blackwood, no relation to Cornelius, but clearly in his pocket. Irrelevant to the charges. Sustained, Judge Harrison ruled without considering the objection. Your Honor, Ashworth protested, the witness's financial motivations are directly relevant to his credibility. Move along, counselor, the judge said dismissively. The jury will disregard. But Jed saw several jurors exchange glances. They weren't completely blind to what was happening, even if they lacked the courage to act on their suspicions. Cornelius himself took the stand next, cutting, a distinguished figure in his tailored suit. He spoke with the confidence of a man accustomed to being believed, painting himself as the victim of a passionate but unstable woman who'd led him into temptation. Charlotte was unlike any woman I'd ever met, he testified with convincing emotion. Beautiful, intelligent, but tormented by some inner darkness. She claimed her father was a tyrant who controlled every aspect of her life.